Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be tuning in from. Welcome to the best practice for DR webinar for VCSPs, of course. So awesome to have you with us. I can see that people are still joining. So if you are with us with the very first time or in a long time, we are now going to have the next webinar of a technical enablement series, during which we're going to cover DR best practices. Let me introduce my colleague Pieter, who is today with me. How are you, Pieter?
Hi, Veronika. Hi, nice to do this webinar with you. Everything is great, so we can just dive straight in.
Perfect. So before we start, there are some rules as usual. So the webinar is being recorded, so we're definitely going to get the recording afterwards. You are muted on the entry, but if you have a question, we have a Q&A and a chat button. So please try to be interactive, ask us questions, share your opinions. We are looking forward to them. And what we are going to talk today about, definitely we will touch aspects of business continuity and disaster recovery. And together with Pieter, we are going to cover why you should do disaster recovery, what are the challenges, what options there are with Veeam, of course. And if you want to share your experiences and your opinions, you are welcome to do it during this webinar or come back to us afterwards. So without further ado, let's go into the subject straight away. Me personally, I work with partners, with VCSP partners, and I've noticed during my discussion with our service provider that the subject of the disaster recovery, DR as a service, gaining some traction recently. And if you follow us on LinkedIn, you must be familiar with a quote that has been used by Jason Buffington, who is our VP Solution Strategy at Veeam. Why BAS when you can DRaaS? So an organization can continue to operate during a disaster. And you've no doubt experienced some kind of disaster event. It could have been something as big as a complete loss of location, services, or the outage of just a specific application. So no matter how big or small, when most of organizations go through their first disaster, they might figure out on their side that the ability to respond was a bit slower than desired. Quite possibly, even the outcome is not exactly what they expected or what they hoped for. And so are we prepared? And the studies shows that more than 82% of business are not or do not feel prepared. It doesn't really matter that, or doesn't even mean that they do not have any plan in place, but will the plan work when needed? And this is what we're going to talk about with Pieter, what you should do, how your plan should look like. Before we jump into this subject, I wanted to show you the latest release of data protection report from 2021. And we are showing in it that there is a rapid change of IT strategy and fast adoption of modern services. So data protection as such is more under pressure to support and help businesses grow. And it becomes hyper important, I would say, because we just said that disaster happen to organizations every day. And anybody who has been in IT for any length of time will be able to say that we should be prepared for the worst, because every potential business disruptions cannot be prevented. And you can take some steps to be prepared as well as you can. And this is why having a comprehensive disaster recovery strategy is very important. And I would even say that it's critical, right, Peter? What do you think about that?
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. And this is why it is interesting to see how businesses and what businesses have to say when it comes to DR. And I have gathered for you this graph where in the dark green, we see our respondents where they choose all that apply, and the bright green is when they could only choose one that is the most important factor for them. And that shows us two very, very strong trends. So if you look for the most common response, so the dark green, the most common reason to use DR as a service is basically freeing up IT resources. Because why? Clients wants to focus on what is their core business, right, Peter? And when you look at the second trend, you really see economics as the top driver. So certainly OPEX versus CAPEX. They want to use PaaS or DRaaS, and they want to pay just for what they use, right? So does it sound familiar for you? But let's take a look on the other things that really stand out in this research. So human costs. If you sum it up, you can say that business continuity, economics, as well as efficiency will be the main drivers. And this is what current user want and do. What do you think, Peter, about that? For me, it really sounds justifiable.
Yeah, well, I think it's indeed a good thing regarding disaster recovery. Like, I'm still shocked about the previous one. Yeah, like 82% of the people
Yeah,
who have maybe disaster recovery in place don't even know or are afraid if it's actually going to work, right? So
yeah,
that's actually a great reason why to use it as a service, because you're also, let's say, renting this knowledge from the service provider, right? So they have done this before. They can use all their experience and knowledge and offer you the best possible service, yeah, so that they know all the stuff that you should be thinking about, that you can just focus on your business. I think that's very important here.
yeah, that's a great point. And for our perspective, it would be very interesting to see what, in your opinions, your customers' main challenge when it comes to disaster recovery might be. So we have prepared a quick poll. So let's take a poll now before we jump further into discussion. Yeah. Yeah, so what's your customer main challenge with disaster recovery? Take a second and select one of the response. You will see that there is other. So we are really interested to hear about, in case you choose this one, what are the other main challenges that you encounter?
Yeah, of course, there is many options here, right? But
Yeah,
I
of
cannot.
course.
Everybody would select all of them probably. So, but it's interesting to see which one. So, it looks
Yeah,
like as expected, I would say, cost and no site available. Yeah.
it seems so, yeah. If we go back to the research, that would be the most common challenges and the reasons why customers are going to, into disaster recovery solutions.
Mm-hmm. It's also interesting to see that, yeah, now 4% of the audience voted for other. For those who have voted other, it would be interesting to know the reason, actually. So if you could put it in the questions pane or in the chat, would be interesting to see why you picked other.
Yeah, definitely. I cannot see the results yet, but if you can see, I think, yeah, now we back to, yeah, so no DR site available. Costs. This was the
Mm-hmm.
what you already mentioned, the
Yeah.
with main reason why customers are looking into disaster recovery and the challenges that they have. Lack of expertise. Yes, that's also very, very highly scored answer. Thank you for that. And as Peter said, we're looking forward to what other means for you. And let's flip sides now, because I told you why to DRaaS, but since everything has its positive and negative, anytime we talk about cloud, or why, we also talk why not cloud, and it always comes down to one thing, in my opinion, it's always security. I mean, interested to hear what is your opinion that for you, but even if in our research that was the top choice of our customers, of our respondents. As you can see on the slides, it is also the most common response, because customers actually are concerned about security, exposing their data. There is also this limited control fear, or speed of recovery, right, as main concern. And this is why service providers from beginning of their offering have to have this box checked, I would say. They have to handle and address the concerns the customer might have. And it's getting even more important if we actually see it, right? So what can we do, or what should we, Peter, do? What would be your recommendation when it comes to DR?
Well, where do we start, right? There's so many recommendations, so that's why we put this whole webinar together, right?
Yeah.
What is also interesting that somebody wrote that yeah, one of the reasons, for example, they don't know better. Yeah, so some customers indeed they just don't maybe realize that there is a need for disaster recovery, right? If we're down, we're down. We'll just go home and not work. Yeah, or customers think that backups are sufficient. Yeah, so that's actually a good one. So we'll talk about that one. So yeah, let's just be clear on this. Environments get bigger, get more complex. Everything changes all the time. We need to update stuff all the time, right? So don't have much time to think about this. Yeah, and when it comes to disaster recovery, then of course time is one thing. We have to put time in thinking about our disaster recovery. Yeah, so it's yeah, also the resources costs money. Yeah, so why are we going to invest in something that maybe we will never use? Yeah, or hopefully never use. That's also something that get a lot. Yeah, and personnel. Yeah, somebody needs to be occupied with this task. Yeah, because disaster recovery is not just something that, you know, let's just take an A4 and write some stuff down and this is yeah, we're done. Now everything is written down and for the rest of the year we're not going to look at it anymore, right? As stated above, change rapidly. Yeah, so everything changes all the time. So also you need to keep up to date with everything. Yeah, so you need to change your disaster recovery plan also according to that. Yeah. So what somebody's actually already mentioned, yeah, a lot of people think that I'm running regular backups, running regular replicas, so I am kind of set. Yeah. Well, it kind of gives you a false feeling, I would say. Yeah. But again, maybe for some workloads or some applications that you are running, backups could be enough. Yeah. For some other applications that you say, I want to have them up and running in just a couple of seconds, minutes, then maybe you should run replicas. Yeah. So regularly customers just run both together, but it kind of gives you, yeah, like, let's say a backup strategy is not a disaster recovery strategy. Yeah. That's what it comes down to. Yeah. Then we always talk about 3-2-1. Yeah. Probably in our webinars, we have mentioned this already a million times. Yeah. So with 3-2-1 in place, imagine that I have this. Am I now safe? Yeah. Well, first of all, you need to think about what am I achieving? Yeah, with 3-2-1. What is it that I'm trying to achieve? I'm just putting my backups on 3 places, yeah, or my applications on 3 places, and probably that will work. Yeah. What am I doing? Does it have anything to do with disaster recovery? Yeah. Does it say anything about how long a restore will take? Because maybe we're backing up every hour or generally as everybody once a day. Did we ever consider how long it will take to recover? And did we actually test this? Yeah. Does it actually say where we're going to restore to? Imagine that half of the infrastructure is done, and we want to get some applications back up and running. Where are we going to restore them to? Yeah. Do we have enough resources? Maybe we need to go and call somebody and rent some resources, and you need to have these things in place. Yeah? In what order are we going to restore actually? Because I can just select all my applications, all my virtual machines, just boot them up, and is that going to work? Well, if some of you have already tried this in the past, then probably you found out that this is not always working, right? Because you first need to, let's say, boot up your domain controller, your DNS system needs to be operational, your database, and then maybe the application using the database can be started. Yeah, if you first start the application, it's obviously not going to work because the data is not available yet. Yeah. And then RPO, RTO, those words keep coming back. So very important that that you think about this. Yeah. So in the end, what do we need? Yeah, I think it's pretty clear. I mentioned it already before. We need a plan, or a plan B. If you already have a plan A, that would be already great. Plan B is maybe even better. But in the end, we need a disaster recovery plan. Yeah, so we need a place where we write down all of this information in detail. Yeah? And generally, when we talk to our partners, and we hear what their customers say to them, then this is generally roughly said the outcome. Yeah, so we talk about disaster recovery, and then indeed, like somebody said, they don't know any better. They don't think about it. They'll just yell and say, "Yeah, we have a problem." Yeah, or call you as a service provider and say, "It's not working anymore. Can you fix it?" And then suddenly, disaster recovery is very hot, right? And as the last joke says, then suddenly the budget is there, right? And unless it gets fixed very fast, and then the idea of having a budget for this also disappears very fast, right? Because we're operational again. But unfortunately, and this is the reality, right? So disaster recovery plan, lots of options that should be in there. We cannot discuss all of them here. We'll be talking the whole day probably. But for example, one of the important things besides all the other stuff that I'm going to mention is the criteria on plan execution. What do I mean with this? Some years already ago, we were already discussing disaster recovery, and the client then said, well, actually, I would like to use, for example, Veeam One, your monitoring and reporting product, to inform me that your infrastructure or my infrastructure is down. And when it sees the infrastructure is down, it needs to start my disaster recovery plan. Basically, I want everything automatically. Sounds great at first, but do you really want to do that? Do you really want a system to automatically decide for you? Because imagine that the electricity goes down, and the electricity might go down for 5 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whole day, whole week. I don't know. You can call the electricity company and try to find out. But at what time are you going to say, okay, now is the time to fail over? So this is something that you actually need to write down. You need to say, we're going to maybe try 1 hour to see if we can get stuff up and running somehow. And then if still everything is down, we are going to initiate our disaster recovery plan, because it's not something that we're just going to flip over and then in 2 minutes, oh, everything is back, let's just start coming back. No, because the plan is in motion. We need to, depending on the step where we are, maybe it's difficult to return immediately at this point, right? And also we need to see who is going to execute this plan. So there's a lot of information that should be in a disaster recovery plan. And the priority, the order to start, as we discussed, SLAs, RPO, RTO. So what are we going to restore? How long should the restore take? Where are we going to restore to? People involved. Somebody probably needs to press a button. Somebody will need to start the failover plan. Is this person still working in the company? Also have discussed this in the past with the clients, that the person who actually had to initiate this was no longer working there, and we're kind of stuck in the disaster recovery plan because, of course, it always happens in the weekend or on a holiday or something. And then, yeah, who am I going to call? Yeah, in the end, I'm gonna call the CEO probably, and he'll say, do whatever you want, as long as it works as soon as possible. But yeah, this is information that needs to be in there so we can properly execute it. Yeah, infrastructure details, application details. What do we need to start up? Everything, just some application, and much more, right? And most important of the disaster recovery plan is probably up to date. Yeah, as mentioned before, the infrastructure in your data center, the customer's infrastructure is changing all the time. We update applications, we create new applications, we remove applications. Yeah, we suddenly migrate to another application. So we need to keep all of this information up to date as good as possible. Yeah. Most important probably also is don't forget the hard copy, yeah, because these days everything is created digitally. So maybe somebody has created very nice Word file, yeah, or PDF that's somewhere on that file server that currently is offline. So now nobody knows what to do. Yeah, maybe you can look on your phone or a tablet or so and access this from somewhere in the cloud if you're lucky. Yeah, but it's not a bad idea to keep one or more hard copies available of this document. Yeah.
So you have to have a
So
plan, has to be up to date, and you have to have a hard
exactly,
copy. And what are the
absolutely.
solutions, Peter?
Well, of course, Veeam has the solution, right? Or
Yeah.
solutions better, yeah, because that's also the idea of today's webinar is disaster recovery as a service is, well, it's pretty clear what needs to be done, but even from Veeam, right, we have several solutions available. And sometimes our partners come to us and ask, which product should I pick? Because I have this use case. And what product is actually the best one for this case? And maybe we end up with something completely different, yeah, or completely different setup. So first of all, we have the classic, let's say, classic Veeam backup and replication setup. Yeah. So it has everything built in, yeah, the backup and replication. So replication is in there for disaster recovery. Yeah. So I personally just call it basic, right? Not to get offended or something, is just, yeah, you set Veeam backup and replication there, and we can start replicating virtual machines to the other side. Yeah, so we need a production side, we need a disaster recovery side. Of course, it could also be active-active, right? Then you can go from left to right, from right to left, and some internet connection that you need in between. Yeah? On the other hand, we have Veeam Cloud Connect. Yeah? Veeam Cloud Connect is kind of where you are playing the disaster recovery side for your clients. So instead of the basic where you have, let's say, two data centers, maybe a client has two data centers and you're setting up replication between those, in Veeam Cloud Connect is the client does not have a secondary site and you're playing that site for the customer, right? So it's multi-tenant, multi-site, basically 100% relying on your infrastructure available, yeah? And we can just use the standard internet, no VPN tunnels needed, and everything is encrypted by default. And then next to that, we also have the Veeam Availability Orchestrator, which is now renamed to Veeam Disaster Recovery Orchestrator, right? Which is actually built on top of Veeam Backup and Replication. Yeah, and I call this complete, right? And you will see later in the presentation why, because it has all the good stuff from Veeam Backup and Replication, but it also includes all the orchestration part, the disaster recovery plan. Yeah, so somebody asked in the chat, do we have an example of a disaster recovery plan? So for example, if we would look at the orchestrator, that one can automatically create the disaster recovery plan for you and keep it up to date. Yeah, so that's really cool stuff. Yeah? So this we all call our Veeam powered DRaaS. Yeah, so these are our Veeam solutions when it comes to disaster recovery. Now, when we talk about replication, we have several options, yeah, because customers have different types of infrastructure. So customer could be running VMware, could be running Hyper-V. What do I need to run on my end as a service provider, and what is working and what is not working? Well, simply said, first of all, we do image-based VM replication, right? So it means you have VM on the left, you will have VM on the right. Yeah? So the options are from vSphere to vSphere, and here you can also use our continuous data protection, right? So the CDP. Then we have from vSphere to vCloud. So you are running a vCloud director environment. Client is just running VMware vSphere. You can also do vCloud to vCloud. So this is to run in your data center. So you're running vCloud director, maybe you have a multi-site setup, and you're offering your customers disaster recovery in case your site is going down. Then you have all the infrastructure and VMs from the client on the other side, and you can boot them up. And then, of course, we also have Hyper-V to Hyper-V. Yeah, so there is no cross hypervisor replication here, right? It's always from the same to the same hypervisor. All right, so this is something important. Yeah. And then we create some snapshots and update this, right? So let me just quickly show this on a whiteboard, just very quickly, if yeah, to see what are the best practices here. And I need to keep the whiteboard up, of course. So let's draw some things. Yeah. So this is straight from the user guide, right? So this is a picture that we have already ready. So if you don't know how to build the replication, this is actually a standard setup. And what we see here is we have here our backup server, right? We have backup proxy, yeah? And generally we have two proxies, yeah? So simple setup would be that we have, for example, a proxy here on the source side, yeah, and we have another proxy here on the target side or the destination side, however you want to call it. Yeah, and the traffic flow would be that we actually have virtual machine here. Yeah, it would be read by the proxy on data center one. Yeah, there the data would be compressed, could be encrypted, then it's being sent to the other proxy. Yeah, no matter what connection you have in between there, could be dedicated connection, could be 10 gig connection, 1 gig, whatever works for you, right? VPN tunnel, some connection, let's say, yeah. And then this data is being put on the target hypervisor, yeah. And then the incremental jobs run, and we just create additional snapshots, and that's it, right? So what is not correct in this picture? Does anybody see it? Yeah, something that is potentially wrong here in this setup. Feel free to write it in the chat. But basically, it all comes down to disaster. What happens in the disaster? Well, this site is going down. Yeah, so it means that backup server in that site's not available anymore. So now what's the problem? How am I going to fail over these virtual machines? Because I have a very nice data center there, yeah, but I have all these replicas there, and yeah, and now what? So the solution to this, or the recommendation to this, is actually to put a Veeam backup server in the disaster recovery side. Makes perfect sense, right? Because if you lose the primary side, then you can use the Veeam Backup and Replication server on the disaster recovery side to boot up, right? So these proxies, they would be managed by the server on the right in the disaster recovery side. So basically, this one would manage the backup jobs and the backup copy jobs, yeah? And this one would manage the replication jobs. So this is in an, let's say, in an active passive setup, yeah, production, disaster recovery side. If you have an active side, yeah, then both servers would maybe do the same, right? You back up locally, you send backup copies maybe to the other side, but you also send, but then the other server on the disaster recovery side will pull in the replicas, yeah, and then you kind of vice versa do the same setup, yeah. So this is what we recommend, so that if your production side goes down, that you can very easily launch the virtual machines, because now I can just go in there and I can start booting up all my virtual machines, and we're good to go. And if now the primary site would go back online, Then I can go into my Veeam server and we can just initiate failback to the original hypervisor, to the original virtual machines. We can update the existing virtual machines if they still exist, or we can just put them as new virtual machines or put them on a new host, yeah, whatever is your situation at that point. Yeah. And then we're basically up and running again. Yeah, so we do have failover, we have failback, and don't forget to commit. Yeah, so it means that at this point here, your VM is running from the snapshots. If you want to keep it there because your primary site is not running anymore, then you need to commit the snapshots, right? Otherwise, it will just keep running on those snapshots, and we all know what happens then, right? Somebody asked about the licensing, if that actually doubles the licensing cost. No. So if you are backing up or replicating or both on the same virtual machine, the cost is still the same, right? So let's say Enterprise Plus 11 points, correct me if I'm wrong, Veronika, but
No,
then
you're
it's
not.
11 points no matter what you do. So you can and backup and replicate the same virtual machine. Yeah, so we have this functionality already in Veeam Backup and Replication today. Yeah, doesn't cost you anything extra. Yeah, probably the only thing that costs you extra is having the secondary site there. Yeah, so this is, let's say, a setup that could work between a customer side and another customer side. Could work between a customer side and a partner side, yeah. But this is how we used to do it before Veeam Cloud Connect, because then you have to think about the security. I have to have a VPN tunnel between each client, right? Do I want to have a VPN tunnel with each single client? Probably not the best idea. In the past, I've actually had a customer who was working with third parties over VPNs, and they actually got ransomware over the VPN from the other company, right? So that's not something that that you want. Yeah. So that's actually while, and there are of course more best practices. Yeah, but we'll just stop here. So, and that's actually what brings us to the next topic is Veeam Cloud Connect. Yeah? Because Veeam Cloud Connect makes disaster recovery easy, right? I think it's a product that is so easy to install these days. Yeah, the functionality is very straightforward, lots of options there. And I remember in the good old days when this product was launched, then when I did one of my first POCs with a partner, I think we set it up within the hour. Yeah? And customer side and partner side. Yeah, and now you're thinking probably that telling a joke here, but in fact we did. We just started the installation on both sides at the same time. We drank some coffee. 15 minutes later, everything was installed, and then we could start creating the jobs. So it was super easy actually to set up. Yeah, and then of course the rest of the day we used to discuss the best practices and how to set it up in a more production way, right? But again, very simple architecture. Yeah. So on the left we have our tenants, and on the right we have our infrastructure in the service provider data center. Yeah. And this infrastructure can be shared. Yeah. Now, some partners, for example, they use the existing infrastructure where they also host customers. Yeah. So what they are using for hosted virtual machines, they can use the same one for disaster recovery, right? As long as you calculate that in case anybody starts the disaster recovery site, if it's all going to work still on the same infrastructure. Some partners opt for having a dedicated disaster recovery infrastructure. I would honestly opt maybe for the first one, just from a financial point of view. It's more interesting, right? And having an infrastructure there that is, let's say, top of the top, very fast, flash, this, that, and then you're never going to use it. It's also kind of sad, right? But we have all the functionality here built in. Customer has nothing to manage at all. Yeah, they will just add you as a service provider, and the resources pop up automatically. All you have to do is create a replication job and select you as a target. And the failover plans are built in. Yeah, and the failover plan is actually something that needs to be created in advance. because when the disaster strikes, it's kind of too late, right? Then you need to start booting up the virtual machines one by one in the order that is needed. With the failover plan, you can do all of this in advance. Then you just launch the plan and you're good to go. Yeah. So this is, for example, a setup with standard VMware vSphere or Microsoft Hyper-V. So in this case, we need to use the hardware plans. What is a hardware plan? Hardware plan is CPU, memory, storage, networking. Yeah? We define all that in Veeam Cloud Connect. Now, if we want to take it one step further, yeah, we can also leverage Veeam Cloud Connect with VMware Cloud Director, yeah, or vCloud Director. It's difficult to change to the new name sometimes because everybody still says VCD. So in this case, we're kind of outsourcing all the management, yeah, of everything that we have to configure on the hardware plan in Veeam Cloud Connect. We're outsourcing it to VMware Cloud Director. So there we are creating the organizations, yeah, the virtual data centers, and then we can link those in Cloud Connect to a tenant, and that's basically it. So then your client will connect to the tenant, and it will end up in the organization virtual data center. Yeah, so it makes it much easier for you because you actually can use all the cool stuff from VMware Cloud Director. Yeah. And optionally, you can also use the Veeam Service Provider Console, yeah, to manage Veeam Cloud Connect. But also, if you have, let's say, multiple data centers, not just one Cloud Connect, but let's say you have 3 data centers, and in each data center, you are having a Cloud Connect installation. How do you manage those? Well, you can manage those in our free product, Veeam Service Provider Console. Yeah, you can do many more things in there. But then you have an overview of what is actually running there. You can manage your tenants there, manage the replication, the failover plans. You can do it all right there. Okay. And you can see optionally, I forgot to mention this earlier, optionally, you can also use the one accelerator. Yeah, so the one accelerator is not to send the data faster over the internet, but it's actually to send less data. Yeah, so we analyze actually the data before sending it, and we check if this data already exists on the target side, yeah, in some caches. And this can be optionally used if you have clients, let's say, with internet connection up to 100 megabit. Yeah, then this is probably a good use case. Yeah, and again, you don't have to have one accelerator per customer. You can overcommit them. Generally, it's okay to do like a 5-on-1. Yeah, 5 customers, one accelerator, or even 10. It depends on your customers, right? See someone ask about does VMware Cloud Director support Hyper-V? Picture seems to say yes, indeed. Our icons always mention ESXi Hyper-V. In this case, no. As I mentioned before, when the target is VMware, you also need to have VMware on the source side. Yeah. So the one accelerator can be up to 1 gigabit. Yes, indeed. The one accelerator can actually work with any connection, with any speed. Yeah. But it's just that it has most effect probably for customers up to 100 megabits. Now we do have a high performance or high bandwidth mode in version 11, that is correct, that can fully saturate, let's say, up to gigabit connections. Yeah, so you can use that one as well in case that you want to send as little data as possible over the network connection. Yeah, but not necessarily because you have a slow connection, because maybe you're just running other services as well over this one. Yeah. Yeah, I see people asking if I can answer their question as well. We will definitely get to the questions. We'll first continue the presentation, and we will definitely answer all of them. Okay. So, small comparison between using hardware plans with Hyper-V and vSphere Cloud Connect application, and when you use vCloud Director. yeah, in Veeam Cloud Connect is that, as I said, the tenant in this case is 100% managed by VCD, yeah, and if you use the hardware plans, everything is configured in Cloud Connect, yeah. Resources, well, it's a resource pool, yeah, and in vCloud Director, there we're using the organization VDC, the virtual data centers. Yeah? As I mentioned, something that is very cool in Cloud Director is that you can have multiple allocation models. And this is also something that we talk about with our customers, yeah, because we can say, okay, Mr. Customer, you want disaster recovery, but when it comes to delivering the service, do you want us to guarantee all of the resources for your virtual machines? So do you want all of the CPU and memory and storage to be there? Of course, storage, yeah, you will have to give that one, yeah. But CPU and memory can be easily overcommitted. So do you want to have just pay as you go and nothing is committed, and yeah, you will see how it runs when it runs? Or do you want to say, I want 10%, 20%, 50% committed? And of course, the more you reserve resources at service provider side, the more you're going to pay, right? So this is also something for you to play with the customer, right? In offering different type of services. Yeah. So on the networking side, we use VLANs on the hardware plans. And then if you use vCloud Director, then obviously you use NS6, yeah, NS6V or NS6T. When it comes to the routing and the firewall, when there is an option to use the Veeam built-in network extension appliance, and this extension appliance can do partial failover, full site failover. It just does everything out of the box. Now, if you say, well, I would not prefer to use a black box because I don't really know what this virtual machine is doing, you can perfectly leverage your own virtual firewalls. It doesn't have to be NS6H or something. You can use whatever it is you want, right? Because it's just networking. We can just use Veeam Cloud Connect for the replication part, and the networking part, you do whatever you want. If you have some stretched network, I don't know, some VPN, whatever it is you want, as long as site A or site B can talk to each other, right? Or you can make the routing work, it's up to you, yeah? But out of the box, we can use the network extension appliance from Veeam, or in VCD, we can use the NSX Edge. Yeah. When it comes to a lot of clients, then generally we see that the manageability is easier with vCloud Director because of all the things that are outsourced to vCloud Director, right? So it makes it a bit easier, yeah, because you can manage it all there. So just a quick comparison, let's say the traditional, yeah, with Veeam Backup and Replication from site to site, or using Veeam Cloud Connect, yeah. We have awesome functionality, that's clear. Yeah, we have failover plan, CDP, VCD to VCD. This is all built in already. Yeah, so this is, maybe you already have this. Yeah, your customer already has this in the license, they don't even know it. With Veeam Cloud Connect, it's focused on the multi-tenant. Yeah, more secure. Well, it's kind of like secure by default. Yeah, more is always difficult thing to say. In the end, you make it as secure as you configure it, right? And of course, you require a separate infrastructure. So you're playing the disaster recovery side for your client. Yeah. Use cases for the traditional setup with replication from site to site is, I've seen some customers use replication actually when they don't have shared storage. They just have two hosts, and they just have building 1 and building 2. And if building 1 goes down, then they start up the VMs in building 2 on host number 2, right? Very simple as that, but it can work. Yeah? Or between sites, between service provider data centers, or between customer and service provider data centers is possible. But again, VPNs, security, question mark. Yeah. Use cases for Cloud Connect. Customer has no disaster recovery infrastructure, so then it's an easy one, right? Because you're going to play the disaster recovery side. And also a lot of partners use it for onboarding. So they say, hey, we migrate your infrastructure to our infrastructure, and then we get rid of yours, and you can run in our hosted environment. So can be used. Yeah, some partners, they use then licenses for 3 or 6 months to do the migration, and then bam, everything is migrated. And they just start backing it up with Veeam Backup and Replication there. Yeah? And optionally, there is yeah, a lot of services that you can then also expand into. Yeah, the offsite backup just offers storage better. MSP backup, Office 365 can be all run on top of Veeam Cloud Connect. Yeah. So on the left side, things to think about: security, overlapping network, yeah, limited reporting, because yeah, you will see if the failover works or doesn't work. But that's kind of it. Yeah, just the general statistics. If you want really reporting or disaster recovery plans, you need to look at the disaster recovery orchestrator. Yeah, and then on the right side, of course, yeah, you need an infrastructure, but you're a service provider. You should have infrastructure, I believe, right? Or somehow present some infrastructure to the client. So yeah, I don't think that's going to be a big issue. Few things to mention that are probably interesting to know is that in a failover plan, you can have many VMs as you want, but only 10 are started at the same time. The other ones go in the queue, right? So think about that. There's no failback plan. Yeah, there is a failover plan, but then when you do a failback, you need to specify the virtual machines yourself and where they need to go and when they need to go, etc. Yeah. Obviously, you cannot run a partial failover and a full site failover at the same time, right? I wonder how you would do that if you have both infrastructures running at the same time with the same IP addresses. That's probably a recipe for disaster. But yeah, so that's not gonna work. Yeah, and tenant can perform partial failover only for VMs with static IP. Yeah. Now, if you think about what is partial failover didn't actually mention this. It's actually when you have all the VMs also at the service provider side, but you just want to launch one virtual machine. Yeah, because it went down on your side and you want to start it up at the service provider rather than restoring it from backup. Then we create VPN tunnel between the service provider and the customer side. And then actually the network is kind of as if it's a stretched network. Yeah. So the failover plan itself, where can it be started? Well, some service providers use the Cloud Connect portal, which is the small add-on when you install Veeam Cloud Connect. It's standalone web tool. These days, not many partners offer it anymore. And actually, if you are using Service Provider Console, then probably you can get rid of it because the Service Provider Console copies all of this functionality. Yeah? So Service Provider Console has the failover plans, as you can see on the screenshot right there. And it's a complete solution. It does much more than that. Yeah, it also does licensing, reporting, and all of this fun stuff. Yeah, that in one of the next webinars we'll talk about the new version of the Service Provider Console. So then you will see all of the other cool stuff that is gonna be there. And it has an API. So if you do automation, then this is a great way for reporting how much your customers are using on your disaster recovery, etc., and much more. And then we have our third setup, yeah, which is the disaster recovery orchestrator. And this is really a complete solution for business continuity, disaster recovery. One of the best things that it does is automated testing, because this is the number one question. We have our disaster recovery in place. Is it gonna work? I have no idea. Yeah, and that comes back to the 82% of customers at the beginning who are not sure that if it's gonna work, because when did they test? Maybe they never test. Maybe they just test when it actually happens. Yeah. So with the orchestrator, you can automatically test and better schedule it. Yeah. So it can just tell you, hey, if you're going to do a failover today, something's not gonna work. And it also gonna tell you what is not gonna work, what is missing. Yeah. And also the dynamic documentation part, right? The disaster recovery plan, everything is created for you. Yeah. And also if you do changes, if you do updates, everything is logged. Yeah. So audit trails, compliance reporting, change tracking, who did what, when. Yeah. And proactive remediation. So it will also tell you that you need to change this in order for it to work. Yeah. And the disaster recovery orchestrator is not just VM replication. It can also orchestrate recovery from backups, yeah, because many customers do both. They send and backups offsite and replicas offsite, yeah, because depending on the RTO, then maybe some VMs can just be restarted, yeah, from the backup. So even that can be automated with the orchestrator, yeah, and it can leverage CDP. And on the bottom you can see storage replication. So we can in fact integrate, yeah, with certain storages, so that you can do storage replication from one array to the array in the disaster recovery side, and then use that to start up your virtual machines and fail back. Yeah, so a lot of options here. So some deployment designs for the orchestrator are active-active, active-passive, yeah, many to one. But keep in mind that it's not multi-tenant. With multi-tenant, we mean that this is not something that you can use like with Cloud Connect. Yeah, it's not, you cannot have the orchestrator installed on your side and at the customer side and then run it over Cloud Connect. No, so this is a dedicated solution that needs to run between, let's say, the customer's data centers or your data centers. Yeah, so you could use the orchestrator to completely orchestrate the disaster recovery between your data centers or the customer's data center, but no customer to partner, right? Otherwise, we're going again to the scenario where we have VPNs and security questions, etc. Yeah, right? So no Cloud Connect integration here. So use cases again: disaster recovery, migration, consolidation, or testing environments. Yeah, because we can use those replicas also for testing. Oh my God, so much content that we had in this hour. Yeah, probably some people's brains are exploding already. I know mine would be if I have to digest all of this content. Yeah, and yes, we know that this is really a lot to digest. So definitely, if you have questions, reach out to us, reach out to your local Veeam service provider, sales contact, or technical contact. Yeah, to discuss this in further depth, because of course it's impossible to do this within just 1 hour, right? So some key takeaways that we want you to remember from this webinar is have a proper disaster recovery plan, because still a lot of customers are not sure, and if it's written down, then they will be more convinced, right? And keep it up to date. Protect your applications, not just VMs. Yeah, so think about the entire set and not just what VM do I need to boot, or I just boot all of them and it's going to work. Didn't actually mention this, but don't forget about the networking and the DNS part. Yeah, so when we talk about disaster recovery, then we say, okay, so now you fail over and bam, my application is up and running in the disaster recovery side. Yes, but if I'm a user somewhere, how am I going to access your web shop, which is now not located anymore on the same site, not on the same IP address, right? So in advance, we need to think about maybe changing TTLs on DNS records, right? And then at that time, switch also the DNS records, so there will be some downtime while that, right? You can script all of this stuff in advance, maybe. Yeah, maybe we need to open some firewall rules, etc. Right? So this is why it is crucial to test and test and test. Yeah. Don't say you have to test every day, because that's probably no one's going to do that anyway. But first of all, we have the options to do some tests, yeah, like start up the machines, see if actually the machines are there, and that's it. But you also need to test the networking part, the DNS part, see if that works. So there are some service providers, for example, who I know, they say to the customer, look, in the contract it says that we're going to test 2 times per year. You can choose the dates, but we need to test it, because if we don't test it and it's not going to work, you're going to blame me anyway, right? And how can I provide you with a proper service if we don't even know if it's going to work, right? So you should test it. Yeah. And let's hope that after this webinar, you get a better idea of what solutions that we have out there. Yeah, so for the certain use cases. So let's hope that now you understand when to pick the correct solution. Of course, we're always out there to help you with this, but let's hope that this webinar helps you with that. Yeah. Additional resources we have, as usual, a ton. Yeah, so these are just a few. We have the DRaaS Partner Success Kit. So that's on the Pro Partner. That's actually really good. There you find all the information in regards to disaster recovery as a service. Yeah. Then we also launched the VCSP Tech Hub, which is also accessible through Pro Partner. And there we are posting videos and some documents that can help you, like migrations, etc. But we are adding more videos for the use cases, like offsite backup, disaster recovery. So if you have if you wonder how do I actually need to set this up, check out the Tech Hub, and we have videos out there showing you how to set up. Yeah, so really technical videos. So just short presentation and then demo, right? So that's really great. The best practices in the VCC book itself. So designs, best practice guides, reference architectures, it's all there. And for the disaster recovery orchestrator, there is a great playlist created by somebody from Veeam on YouTube. It actually shows you how to install it, how to create the plans, how to test the plans, right? All the options available on the disaster recovery orchestrator. And it's almost no slides. It's really all demo part, right? So that's really great. So with that, we have come at the end of our webinar. So let's say answer some questions. So if you have any questions, then well, feel free to post them. I see we have a ton, so we will stay here for a couple of more minutes to answer the questions. Of course, we will share the presentation and the recording later. And yeah, we hope that this has been a useful webinar for you. If you have any suggestions as well for a next topic of webinars, feel free to write it in the chat. Or if you say, I still have no idea what you're talking about with disaster recovery, can you please do a webinar or specific on this part or do a demo or something? Please write it there, and then the more feedback we get from you guys, the better, right? Because then we can create this content for you to help.
Definitely.
Veronika, anything to
Thanks,
add?
Pieter. No, thank you for your comments, for your suggestions. And yes, let's take a look on a few questions. There were a few about migration that you mentioned a couple of times. So what about handling those in the first place? It was a question, uh, let me check. Yeah, can we use Veeam traditional for migration from Azure native to VMware infrastructure? I know it does not support cross environments, but do we
Yeah,
have any workaround to do that?
good question. Yeah, and probably some questions also ask about the other way around. Yeah, like can
Yeah.
we leverage public cloud as a disaster recovery site? So first of all, to be the disaster recovery site from something that's running in the public cloud, well, we cannot do public cloud to, let's say, vSphere or Hyper-V infrastructure, but what we can do is we can install, for example, Veeam Backup for Microsoft Azure, or Veeam Backup for Google Cloud, or Veeam Backup for AWS. Backup those virtual machines there. And then we can use Veeam Backup and Replication to pull in a backup copy from that blob storage, yeah, where you store those backups. And then you can, from that backup, restore directly to a Hyper-V environment or to a vSphere environment. Yeah. So that works, but generally it's kind of recommended just for migration migration means, because again, it doesn't have any of the failover plans or something, right? So you're going to restart something on your platform, and then the question is, and now what? How are we gonna get back? So it means we need to back up again the machine and then do a restore to Azure or restore to AWS or restore to Google. Yeah, so it can work, but it's let's say it has some manual steps involved. Yeah.
Thank you. And we have a couple of questions about the replication. So can the proxy in the main side be in the same Veeam backup server and same for the DR side? Can the destination proxy be in the same DR Veeam server? for the replication in their side, and of course questions about storage needed for the replication or
Yes,
something that you
yes.
recommended. Yeah. What do you say?
Let's see. Yeah, so somebody asked indeed about to have two Veeam servers or just primary server in the DR side. Yeah, so the idea is to have a Veeam Backup and Replication server on the production side, yeah, where you do your backups and your backup copies, but to also have a Veeam server, separate Veeam server, yeah, physical or virtual, doesn't matter, on the disaster recovery side that will manage the replication part. Yeah, so that will pull in the replicas from the production side. Yeah, so in the end, ideally you have two servers, right? Or if you have a third site, you could put the Veeam server there, and then it could do and the backups and the replicas, yeah, because it can kind of orchestrate both sides from one server. But then you fully rely on the internet connection. Yeah, if the internet connection goes down, then nothing works anymore. Yeah, that's the whole idea of why to have a Veeam server in every site, so that then if the production side goes down, we have the Veeam server managing the replication there in the disaster recovery side, and we can just start up the disaster recovery and do failover, failback. Yeah.
Should we take backup before replication, or can we replicate from the main side to your side without backup? That was one of the questions as well.
Yeah, good question. We can replicate directly, yeah, so VM to VM. We can also use to create a replica from the backup. So you first, for example, send the backup, and then from that latest backup, we can create the replica. So we kind of do a restore, right, and update the replica. In that case, it means that the replica on the DR side will be as old as the last backup. But it's a possibility. Yeah, that way you don't have to send the same data twice. But generally, yeah, you want to back up everything, right? And then you also want to select the virtual machines that you want to replicate. So yeah. What about the storage needed for replication? Well, it all depends what you mean the storage. If you want to say, do we need in particular any type of storage? We're storage agnostic, right? So it just you want to use local storage, you can use local storage. Yeah. Obviously, when you use VCD, then you're going to use shared storage, yeah, like I don't know, vSAN or block storage, file storage, whatever you want. But you can use any type of storage. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a SAN, it can be local storage. Yeah, it can be as easy as you want. Yeah. Somebody asked to also whiteboard the Cloud Connect based solution. Yeah, so we went over that one on the slides. Yeah, so and also we have this in the best practices in the vccbook.io. There you also find the entire Cloud Connect architecture. Okay. Somebody asks, does Veeam Cloud Connect support SharePoint side backup? Well, good question. But basically, you can use, there are two separate solutions, right? We have Veeam Backup for Office 365, we have Veeam Cloud Connect. The only thing that Veeam Cloud Connect can be used for in a setup with Office 365 is if you as a partner are making the Office 365 backups and you're using Cloud Connect, but you have a customer who has a local Veeam Backup and Replication server, and you want to connect them over the Cloud Connect so they can pull in the data from Office 365 for recovery. Yeah, so you're using Veeam Cloud Connect only as a kind of network overlay between the customer and you, so they don't have to install Veeam Backup for Office 365 at their side, but they just use the UI to read the data from the backup and do restores. Yeah. Is there a guide for leveraging Veeam Cloud Connect with VCD? So yeah, vccbook.io, that's the guide. There you will find the reference architecture, even with all the ports and everything drawn. So there you can find it. Let's see. think we have answered most of the question. Yeah, somebody asked, next topic, how to implement DRaaS in an easy way for VCSP. Yeah. It's all very easy, yeah, but you have to do it once to understand, right, how to set it up. So, or maybe it's just easy because I do this quite a lot, and so that's fair. So some other suggestions for next topics. So that's great. Yeah, somebody asked on the emphasize more on the 3-2-1-1-0 versus 3-2-1 rules. Yeah, of course we have these, yeah, but those are more related to backup. Yeah, so that's why we did not go deeper on 3-2-1-1-0 in this webinar. Yeah. Yeah, somebody said that the VCC book.io is only for an old version. Well, in fact, it does say 9.5, but the architecture, nothing changed actually in version 10 or 11. Yeah, so it's still valid and it will be updated soon. So because people seem to have a problem with seeing old numbers.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of questions. So I think let's wrap it up. I think a lot of people maybe want to go to the next meeting or are hungry or something else, right? Or finish the day. What we can do is we will just go once more over all the questions, and we will send an answer to you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much for the your attention, for participation, and yes, we're looking forward to see you next time. Have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everybody. See you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.